Now we're gonna start live streaming this on YouTube to keep it in our YouTube channel for people to further go back for it whenever they want. So this is just to keep you updated that this session will be recorded and will be live streamed on YouTube. Thank you. Yeah.
So I would like to reintroduce our guest speaker for today. Today we're going to have Dr. Hamad Al-Sinawi. He's a senior consultant in psychiatry. He did his medical training in the UK, and he's a mental health expert in both adult and the elderly. And he also conducts workshops in the topic of mental health and medical education. According to the previous theme events, we did talk about medical errors and the whole thing about it, but we didn't touch upon a very important aspect, just the mental health aspect of it. So we are very excited, and it's going to be a fruitful session indeed. Dr. Hamad, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Yamama, and the rest of the team. Very pleased for the invitation. I'm happy to be among you. Just a small correction. I actually did my undergrad medication at SQU. There was an SQ that time. الدفعة الثانية ما شاء الله. And but I did my psychiatry training in the UK. So thank you for the introduction. Today we are going to talk about the psychological impact of medical errors on doctors specifically. And as Yamama mentioned, it's quite neglected. And we are going to cover different aspects related to the process involved after a medical error. The outline, as suggested by the team, we're going to go through the emotion that usually experienced by doctors following a medical error. How do most people deal with such emotions? We're going to talk about different dealing mechanisms, what can be done for doctor to be supported, and finally, is there a protocol in Oman? So to begin with, I'd like to share an experience that I went through when I was a resident at the UK. Actually, it was not a personal experience, it was a team experience. So basically, I think I was still an R1 resident in the UK, and we had a patient who had chronic obsessive compulsive disorder, which means that he had thought and images and reaction that he did not want and wanted to suppress, but he felt the urge to commit them. And in particular, he had fear of stabbing his wife or family member. So he does not want to stab them, but whenever he's in the kitchen and he would see a knife, he would have fear of using them. And he has been in hospital it was kind of a longish admission, and he was allowed to go out with the family for a weekend. Sometimes his wife will pass by, and all the family are aware of his symptoms, so they felt safe to be with him. But at a certain stage, he was starting to express thoughts of wanting to end his life. I remember this quite clearly. He used to work as a train driver. So after retirement, when he stayed at home, he was looking after his own hobbies. And when he became depressed, he kept thinking that he wanted to jump in front of a train. And while in hospital, there was one of misconceptions that people with OCD are less likely to commit suicide. But in this particular case, the patient did tell the team that he was going to kill himself. I was among the residents who assessed him and documented his thoughts or his intention in the medical notes. And after I mentioned this to my consultant, and the consultant suggested change of his medication and to be reviewed later. But sadly, that particular afternoon, he walked out of the hospital and did what he'd been threatening to do. So he jumped in front of the train and ended his life. Obviously, it was a shock for everybody. Doctors, nurses, social workers, psychologists, and even the medical student who was attached to this. Because I remember first thing that jumped to my head is that could we have prevented this? Are we guilty for not helping this particular person that was under our care? What would happen to us? What would happen to what would be the legal process that we'll go through? We felt guilty, we felt shame, I personally felt at time angry toward this particular patient because he put us through. And that's quite an interesting emotion because it wasn't just me who felt that, but other members of the team felt that anger, like, why did you do this to us? Because everybody knew is going to be consequences. This patient was at hospital. He communicated what he was intending to do, yet people kind of overlooked it. And to me, this is one particular medical error, team medical error rather, because I was a junior member of the team then. And as a consequence, we all had to go for interviews, every single person, we had to go. It was quite lengthy, it was quite traumatizing. Although they say it's not a finger blaming or not a blaming exercise, that's how it felt, because we had to go through the whole process of what did you do, what could have been done, and blah, blah, blah. And as a consequence, the consultant I worked with was kind of suspended for a year. So it was quite a serious concern. The reason I am starting with this, because this is a particular, it kind of brings it home when you have a personal touch to it. So this was my experience with a team kind of medical error that happened with when I was a trainee. So let's kickstart with a few facts when we talk about medical errors and psychological impact. Let's all start by agreeing that actually, as doctors, we have to be perfectionists. You people, starting from being a medical student, just junior doctors, and even as consultant, you gradually learn to give up your weekends, to stay longer at hospital. With time, people don't mind being on call during Eid when everybody's sharing their Eid selfies and posting Instagram. People become perfectionists because, in a sense, that's one of the virtues that makes you a good doctor. But this perfectionism sometimes can have other consequences. And actually, one of the kind of merits of a successful doctor is your clinical performance. So you have to be perfectionist in order to be clinically, doing well and performing. But there is what is called this toxic culture of perfectionism, where it finds it difficult for people to, admit having a medical error or committing a medical error, or even sometimes concealing it. Or sometimes there is something called near misses, where actually there is an error, but it didn't lead to death. There was not severe. It was مثل ما نقول الله ستر على آخر لحظة يعني. So what is called as near miss. So the impact is often overlooked, like we said in the introduction, and most people talk about a second victim. The first victim is the patient and his family who go through the loss that can occur from medical error. But the second victim is the doctor that sometimes or often kind of suffer in silence. Most of the time when doctors are contemplating to disclose any particular, they worry about the harm of this doctor-patient relationship. The trust becomes shaken. They also worry about the impact of their jobs, the relationship with their family, their legal status. And one of the biggest studies that included almost 800 surgeons, 60 of those people who reported a major a medical error had suicidal ideation. And that's a very serious thing, that when people, specifically doctors, are experiencing suicidal ideation, sometimes they might be at a higher risk because of their access to lethal material, either medication or other forms of suicide. Also, those people who perceive themselves have made an error have a 3 times higher risk of having suicidal ideation. Same also, this is just a repetition. So what happens, what do we do when we kind of get involved in medical errors? What are the common emotions that doctors go through? So there's a missing slide here. Yes, so most of the studies done in this field come from qualitative studies done mainly on residents, because most of the work, although doctors from all grades commit medical errors, but most of the studies or literature are based from qualitative interviews, focus group. So emotions that come to mind is feeling of guilt and shame. These were the most common reported emotions. Some people have anxiety and fear for the patient, especially if the medical error did not lead directly to death. Quite a number, 20%, found themselves questioning their own professional competence. So they feel they're unable to do their job. They're not good enough doctors just because they did one mistake. Remember the perfectionism we talked about. Some feel angry to their team as a whole, so they feel they were let out. How did I end up committing this error? and up to 80% remain fixated in their memories. So as I demonstrated in the first slide talking about the event that happened while I was a resident many years ago. So it's quite common for people to carry that memory for a very long time. Some doctors experience what we call preventative medicine, or protective medicine. So they will do unnecessary investigations. Sometimes they feel they lack self-esteem. They don't feel confident to do on-call on their own. They will repeatedly check with their senior doctors simply because they feel they might have missed something. That kind of incidents that led to the medical error would keep them feel very, lacking confidence. Also, there are repercussions of toxic culture among medical professionals that encourage them to conceal errors. So sometimes people feel that if it's a minor error, they don't disclose it. Patient might suffer in silence. They don't come out with it, which is unethical, to say the least. So concealment becomes a way of avoiding to disclose a medical error for fear of the consequences we talked about. So we talked about the different emotions: anger, lacking of self-esteem, fear from litigation, relationship problems with colleagues, and even family. So how do doctors deal with those kind of emotions? Most people tend to deny them and continue practicing like nothing has happened. And that can be dangerous because, eventually with time, stressful events accumulate till the person gets to the point of feeling a mental breakdown. Some people feel that I must be able to cope with this alone. So they shy out, they don't speak to the families or their friends, they don't seek professional support, even if there is one provided, because they are worried people might take a negative impression about them. People might not forget that this is the doctor who did this particular error. And especially now in the era of social media, whatever happens in hospital, people will just go out and tweet it and retweet it, and suddenly you can become a trend, but not in a positive way, unfortunately. Some people do access help either through informally, so they will talk to colleagues they feel comfortable with. They might seek help and advice with mentors. Some talk to their family members, and some seek professional help. Sadly, there are studies suggested some doctors develop addiction, so they start misusing substances. They can, some of them use alcohol, some even use illicit drugs, to the point of destroying their life, professional and personal lives. And because of access to medication, addictive medication, hospital, there are reports that some doctors do misuse medication from hospital, and they become addicts at the end of the And some people eventually leave medicine because they can't cope with the shame that happened to them. So this single medical error changes their life dream of becoming a doctor. So as you see, quite a mixture of different emotions and several factors that play in what happens to each person that there's no time for us to mention today. This is another big study, including more than 3,000 physicians from Canada and the USA. Felt that 90% there did not get enough support from their employers. 82% reported they were very interested in counseling after medical error, which is a good thing because counseling can help bring a person back to life, restore confidence, and help them ventilate the feeling without them feeling being judged or being criticized or being made to feel incompetent. It was interesting, there are variation in specialties. So pediatricians are more likely to express an interest in counseling, while surgeons were the least. I suppose part of it is that I do personally believe that your personality has a role in deciding what specialty you end up doing. And we actually did a small research with our residents, and we did found kind of some clusters. So certain personalities were attracted to a particular specialty, for example. So something that to bear in mind. Also, female surgeons and people who perceive them, female physicians, and physicians perceiving themselves to be at high risk of being sued and being subjected to legal procedures were having more negative impact on their life. So this constant fear that something bad is going to happen. I might lose my license. I might lose my future, my income, the thing that I've trained 7 years or more from medical school to residency and through. So when they look at it, this has a severe psychological impact on them. It was interesting that when doctors were asked why they wouldn't accept counseling, so the first thing, some people felt it would take time away from their work. So they just wanted to focus at work. They wanted to regain their confidence, so they felt there is no time for counseling. Some didn't believe it is going to help them because they have this perception that counseling is just pop talk or just talking to other person without seeing the actual value of counseling. Some were worried about confidentiality. Basically, they didn't want medical notes to include anything about their psychological well-being for fear this might be used against them in the future or when it comes to when it comes to appraisal or promotion or things like that. They also thought they might end up having to pay more for insurance because they've been, went through counseling. Others were worried of being judged negatively by their colleagues. And again, surgeons are less likely to believe in counseling. Right, so we move now, we're approaching almost the end of the talk. So what can we do for to restore psychological well-being for doctors following the medical errors? First and foremost, I think that I personally believe in a concept called psychological safety. And this is something that we need to learn or teach or practice with our colleagues since they are medical students. So psychological safety in short means that having an environment that allows people to express themselves, look after their mental health well-being. Don't shy away or hide from making an error. Talk about it. Let others learn from it. Make it a learning exercise. And in this way, we don't repeat the same questions. So you make it an explicit priority in your team that there is psychological safety. You facilitate everyone to speak out. Nobody is absolutely right or absolutely wrong. It's all about having an open discussion. You would establish norms of how failure is handled. So we don't blame you as a person. We go through a process of reflecting on what happened. And then this becomes a learning exercise to develop us and learn so we could learn and cope better in the future. We also create a space for new ideas. So everybody is welcome to throw ideas. And it's interesting with, in some teams, younger people are more active in coming up with ideas because they have not been stained with negative experiences. So, they're wild and they're open for suggestions and exploring the world. And also embrace productive conflicts. So if there is a conflict between two members of the team, let's talk about it, let's explore it and dispose of it instead of it becoming a very toxic working environment. So this is a thing that I personally feel is completely useful to begin with in any team. So if there is psychological safety, medical errors are dealt with in a more healthy way. Along with this, also hospitals and organizations need to provide support after the medical error. Sadly, all the attention goes for the patient and the family and the legal proceeding, and the doctors most of the time feels alone, feels they are isolated, feels that have not gotten any particular support or help. So they end up suffering in silence. Sometimes things like debriefing following a critical incident, having people given a chance to either to do a telephone or online counseling or arranging for counseling to be done out of working hours, so people who have that challenge can be helped to overcome it. People should be reminded that seeking support is never a sign of weakness. بالعكس, it means that you want to learn, you want to develop yourself. And also in cases of near misses, which is like the closest to a medical error, support can be given to doctors and any other teams. Other suggestion, given a chance to talk to someone, be it a colleague, a senior colleague, or a mentor. The person to talk to needs to have some kind of communication skills so they are non-judgmental. They don't jump to conclusion, they listen, and they allow the person to go through a ventilation process and move on following the event. There's also reaffirmation competence. What happens after the medical error? We talked about doctors feeling lack of self-esteem, feeling shaken, their competence is tamed. So how do we reaffirm that? What can we do to restore their self-confidence? How can we validate their decision-making process to avoid going through the same mistake again? And how do constantly remind ourselves that you are more than a doctor. You are a person, you are a friend, a brother, a sister, a parent, someone with a life outside medicine. So having performed this particular unhelpful event, that being through a medical error does not make you a bad person. It's just like مطبة على الطريق. People need to be assured that they can restore their confidence. The situation in Oman, I can talk about residents mainly. There is a psychological well-being sections, so they are providing psychological support for residents who are registered with the OMSP. OMA also provides legal help. I'm not sure if there is any formal psychological help, but most people do arrange for their own. Sometimes we get referral from colleagues about other colleagues. But I think one of the setbacks is that we are a very small community, and some people are worried about stigma and mental health and being, lack of confidence. Although we assure everybody that whatever they tell us, is going to be dealt with in confidentiality. But some people are reluctant to seek help. Most people seek informal support, so they'll talk to people they feel comfortable with, and they're able to, pass through this process and eventually. I personally feel more formal support should be available. Now, post-COVID, online platforms have been very useful, and that is something that can be entertained and actually provided officially for health organization. People are given access, so they don't have to pay from their own pocket, or they don't have to go on their own time to seek psychological help and support. So this is something that we hope the future will bring with. So in conclusion, this is a quote that I'd like to end with. I found this very, it summarizes what we've been talking about. So this is to say, there are two sets of victims after a system failure or a human error has led to injury. And we have not done a good job in helping either. The first group of victims is the patient, their families. The second is the healthcare worker involved in the incident. So everybody, both parties need to be supported and helped. These are my references, and that's my contact if anybody is interested to talk anything related to particular related to today's presentation. I'm happy to talk with people and discuss more ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for this great discussion. I know personally I've learned a lot, and I was more aware about certain things, and I'm sure that our participants have felt the same as well. Currently right now, so thanks a lot, Doctor. So if someone has any questions or any queries before we will be split into small working groups, like breakout rooms. I'll give it a minute before we do that. I think someone raised his hand. Shihab, you can go ahead.
Thank you, first of all, Doctor, for your very informative and enlightening presentation. It was really amazing. I just had a question. It's more patient-oriented or psychological-oriented for the patient. What can we do for the future? For example, patients that go to private clinics and receive a long subscription list and a financial burden for them because they are diagnosed with many conditions which actually they don't have. What is your take on this situation, and how can we tackle it, and how can we regulate these things that are done and we see in our society.
Thank you, Shihab. Very interesting question. It's more ethical and practical. It's kind of away from today's topic, but in short, sadly, that's the situation. I personally, sometimes when I accompany family members, I come across doctors who would unnecessarily prescribe, and especially big private hospitals. And sometimes I do see patients coming to my clinic where MRI is kind of being ordered unnecessarily from the first visit. So part of it, I think, is because of financial gain. So hospitals who have labs and CT machines, CT sections, they benefit from this. And there is no system to argue with the doctors, because sometimes, unless you go individually and start questioning the doctors, like, what is your differential diagnosis? Why did you order this test? What were you hoping to come out from this particular test? And it's quite difficult, because I know at the moment we are just leaving it to the morals of each of doctors, but I'm hoping there will be a system, because sometimes it's extremely difficult to go one by one to try to justify particular test. And I suppose part of it is patients' education. Now I'm seeing more patients who would come and learn more about their illnesses. They would research, or so some of them, they just go to Google and learn about their symptoms, they learn about side effect of medication. But encouraging patients' education can be the way for the future. So when a patient is given medication, they could go and try to have it scrutinized, so understanding what this medication is for, why am I taking it, why should I spend on this particular test. So when it comes to legal and forming rules, I think it's difficult for each person to be screened and reassessed. And maybe one way of doing this is having competent doctors and having a system of there's a word for it. So critical appraisal is something that used to be done in the past. So each doctor will be appraised in a regular way to make sure that they're competent, they're not breaking rules, and they're not making financial benefit from patients. I hope that answered your question, Shihab.
Yeah, thank you very much. Like, I also feel that we should have like protocols and some policies on and stances, especially in our government and our Wizara, so we can so we can keep this more like known and raise this ethic in our society. I just wanted to say that sometimes if these things happen, it affects the patients by them starting to question the doctor and not trusting the doctor in some things. So maybe that could be even an issue. Yeah, patient education is necessary, and we need that. But also we need our doctors to try to feel that a patient isn't just someone that you order for him and he doesn't have a say. They should also have that trust between the patient and the doctor at the same time.
Totally agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Does someone have any other question before we proceed? Okay. Now I'd like to encourage all of you to actually open your cameras, because you're going to take a group photo before we proceed to the breakout rooms.
Doctor, maybe you can stop share screening so we can.
Sure. I didn't realize that.
Thank you very much. Take your time, maybe like 1 minute to prepare yourself, dress up and stay in a good place so we can take a good picture. We'll wait for 1 minute. Does anyone else wants to open, or should we just go on and just take a picture? Do you want me to take the picture, man, or do you want to take it?
Can you take it, please?
Yeah, no problem. So I'll count to 3 and everyone smile. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. So that was it. We can send you the picture later on, doctor. Thank you for
Thank you.
being
Thank you very
here.
much. Thank you. My pleasure.
Very informative and needed session. So thank you for covering it for us.
Thank you. You take care. في أمان الله.
All right. So, given that we had this great discussion with the doctor, now we are going to be split into breakout rooms. And based on that breakout rooms, there will be a Google form link. I am going to paste it in the chat right now. So each breakout room can go access it and answer the questions and discuss about what's in there. So if the technical team can please break us into breakout rooms, that would be great. Thank you.
And please allow all the participants to share screens, because in the breakout rooms, like, it would be good if we could share our documents.
How many participants do you need for each breakout room?
Since we're 50, let's go like with 10 to 12.
I did 5 breakout rooms, around 11 in each one. Okay.
Okay, good. So for the heads and me, Melak, Imam, and so on, can you please just make sure that at least one of you is in one of the breakout rooms to encourage them to participate?
As a co-host, you can move randomly in any room you want.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I will assume that everyone came out from the breakout rooms. I'd like just to conclude today's that theme event. I hope you liked it. I know personally I learned a lot, and we had a great discussion. So thank you everyone, and I hope you have a good rest of the day and you have enjoyed it like I did.
Paula wants to add something.
Yes, مع إني يعني ما مداني بس يعني thank you so much for your efforts. I think يعني إنه فاتني بس يعني لأذنكم إذا ما يبهتوني الله يهديكم، أنا عبالي العصر مفهيئة شوية اليوم. زين المهم أبغى أخذ صورة جماعية إذا ممكن. فتحوا
تفضلينا
كاميرا.
مع الدكتور.
أوكي خلاص يعني. زين.
But
No.
sorry to cut, but one thing we would like to share the responses really quickly just to get an idea of what everyone thought about it. So yeah, just give me a second.
Thank you for being active and participating. For some, I entered some breakout rooms. They were very, very nice, like thoughts. So it would only be right to share them for like 5 minutes. And until maybe like we get the responses, I just want to say, don't forget the social program. We'll be ending today's sessions with it. It will be very nice. And we have like some hidden surprises there. So please attend. You can go on. Sorry.
Yeah, so okay, here. So the first question was, imagine you're a doctor who committed medical error. Describe how you feel at that moment. So basically, people said, I'm going to feel bad, guilty, sad, lose my confidence. But someone here, I like this answer. At first, I'll feel depressed, I think. Then I'll do my best to fix this error if it's possible. So whoever said this, thumbs up to you. I'll feel very frustrated at first, but then I'll try to avoid mistakes and learn from my mistakes not to repeat them. Perfect. Guilty, incompetent, ashamed, embarrassment. Yep. If unable to cope, we shall seek help. Absolutely brilliant. I won't tell my family, friends I feel comfortable with, but the one thing to get better, I'll tell them and learn from my mistake and move on. Yep. Maybe even if the error was that big. Ashamed. I'm going to feel bad. I don't deserve to be a doctor. Okay, so we can conclude that yes, everyone will surely not feel happy, of course. They would feel sad, depressed, ashamed, all these feelings. And I think that's normal because you did make a mistake and that's a normal feeling. However, that's when I was like saying brilliant. I was applauding some of you. You should know what's the next step. As I said, yeah, it's normal to feel sad and depressed and all that, but you shouldn't let it consume you. You should know how to act on first. If you feel that you cannot take control of these feelings, please don't feel ashamed or shy to seek help. There is so many like options around you for in order to get help, and you should always go through that path. Rather than like letting you uh, leave medicine or things like that, because there's always a solution for everything, and we are not perfect. We are humans. Things happen. I know doctors kind of have to be perfect, as some people say, but we are humans at the end of the day. We can't control everything. Some things happen that's out of our control, and when it's out of our control, then we shouldn't let it consume us. So that's the message for today. How would you rate the overall awareness of people when it comes to mental health of physicians after committing a medical error? You said there is a lack of awareness, and that is true. I also agree with you. 100% of you said that, so that's good. If you had to advocate for physicians' mental health, what will you do? Yep, someone says that there are those diseases that we cannot see but are rooted in our soul. I'll encourage him to go and like continue his work and learn from his mistakes. Absolutely. Having a special consultant, convince people. Yep. Routine reminder. I like this one, the routine reminder. I think sometimes I also discussed in the breakout room that I was in is that maybe it will be nice to rather, you know how in hospitals we also have conferences going on, but we have a conference where we just remind the physicians that medical errors happen, and when they happen, what to do after that, and to provide more support, as you guys said. Volunteer for local mental health organization. That's a great form of advocacy. Yep. Support the physicians, raising awareness. People know about it, especially on social media. Yes, absolutely. I think I also like this point in speaking about social media because I'm gonna try to speak fast. Because as the doctor said, social media is normally the people where people normally the place where people shame doctors. So by putting more awareness on social media, at least we could bring the two people who are, what you could say, affected by this situation. So not just the patient, but also be aware that yes, doctors are affected too. Also, there should be a committee to help physicians to get better. Yes, making campaigns, hashtags, spread awareness about this. Yep, this is very, very holistic answer. Again, not ashamed to go for counseling session. So yeah, absolutely. So I know I don't want to keep you for long, but the takeaway message from this is mistakes do happen and it affects both the patient and the doctor. Doctor's mentality, yes, they are perfectionists, they don't want to make mistakes. However, in the case that they do and it's out of their hands, they have to be aware of the mental health issues and have to, act upon that in a good way, of course, and we have to be advocates and raise awareness. And we as medical students, we could start that path and increase the, be advocates for this thing. So yeah, thank you all once again for being here today, and I hope you have the rest of the day. If you have anything, let me see the chat. Oops. I don't know, it's not showing. Maybe I should stop share. Yeah, thank you. All right. Yeah. Okay. Have a good rest of the day.